Jimmy Delaney was a man whose name commanded respect. At 42, he had built an empire from nothing but sheer grit and unrelenting ambition. The story of his beginnings was legendary in business circles. Raised in a rundown apartment in the Bronx, Jimmy clawed his way up through odd jobs, hustling vintage watches on eBay, flipping real estate, and eventually creating Delaney Enterprises, a sprawling conglomerate spanning real estate, tech startups, luxury fashion, and even a film studio. He became a billionaire before his 35th birthday. With wealth came power, and with power came temptation. Jimmy was not married. He claimed it was because he had no time for love, but in truth, he had many lovers. His charm was magnetic, and his good looks, chiseled features, sharp jawline, stunning inks, and piercing blue eyes didn't hurt. But it was his confidence and success that lured women like moths to flame. He began having discreet affairs with models, actresses, and eventually, his own employees. He would make promises, promotions, investments, new apartments, and most of the time he delivered, at first. His board of directors whispered, HR filed quiet complaints, but Jimmy was too high to be touched. He thought himself untouchable. Then one night, something changed. It was a warm autumn evening. Jimmy had gone to inspect a derelict mansion he'd just acquired on the outskirts of upstate New York. The plan was to flip it into a luxurious retreat for his wealthiest clients. As he roamed the dust-filled corridors with only a flashlight and his ego, he entered the attic, a room untouched since the 1800s. There, among rotting dolls and cobwebbed trunks, stood a dusty mirror, its surface warped and dark. Drawn to it, Jimmy touched the glass. He felt something. It wasn't dramatic, no flashes of light, no demonic laughter. Just a soft whisper in the back of his mind. Tomorrow. You can do it tomorrow. That night, back in his penthouse suite, Jimmy stared at his laptop. He had urgent documents to sign. His CFO was waiting for his approval on a massive acquisition in Tokyo. His assistant had sent a reminder for a board meeting the next morning. Jimmy yawned. Tomorrow, he muttered, closing the laptop. And that's how it started. In the days that followed, Jimmy delayed signing documents. Postponed meetings. Ignored follow-ups. We'll deal with it next week, became his motto. Projects stalled. Employees waited. Partners complained. His lovers began noticing it too. He would promise to call. Tomorrow. He'd arrange getaways that he'd cancel last minute. The once fiery, seductive Jimmy became a man who just postponed. His empire began to show cracks. The Tokyo deal fell through. A film he'd financed with great fanfare flopped because he delayed its marketing launch. Developers walked out of a major real estate project after months of inaction. Investors lost faith. He started missing meetings entirely. His employees were in chaos, there was no leadership, no direction. His top executives resigned. One by one, his affairs unraveled too. The women who once swooned for him began to see through the charm. Lawsuits began to pile up, claims of harassment, breach of contract, negligence. Still, Jimmy did nothing. He stayed in his penthouse. Alone. Surrounded by screens he didn't turn on, contracts he didn't read, and mirrors that seemed darker than before. The whispers were louder now. Tomorrow. It will all be better tomorrow. He told himself he was just resting. That he'd get back on track next week. That he'd rebuild again. But tomorrow never came. 1 year after that night in the mansion, Delaney Enterprises filed for bankruptcy. His accounts were frozen. Properties seized. Media outlets devoured the scandal with glee. He had gone from mogul to myth, his name now synonymous with squandered potential. Some say they still see him walking the ruined halls of that mansion, mumbling about plans, dreams, and projects he'll finish tomorrow. Others claim the mirror is still there, waiting for its next ambitious soul. But most agree, Jimmy Delaney wasn't ruined by scandal, or bad deals, or even the affairs. He was ruined by delay. By that slow, creeping possession of inaction. By the spirit of tomorrow. The rise, fall, and redemption of Jimmy Delaney. Jimmy Delaney was the embodiment of the American dream, or at least, the version painted on glossy magazine covers and Instagram posts. A man born into hardship, who broke out of a life of struggle with grit, guts, and an almost supernatural ability to close deals and charm crowds. In his early 20s, he worked night shifts at a 24-hour diner in the Bronx, saving tips in a jar he kept hidden under his bed. By 25, he'd taught himself stock trading through YouTube videos and bootleg ebooks. By 30, he was flipping undervalued properties in gentrifying neighborhoods, converting them into stylish lofts and turning six-figure profits overnight. He launched Delaney Enterprises and expanded into tech startups, fashion, and luxury real estate. Investors worshipped him. The media crowned him Wall Street's maverick. His reputation soared, and so did his appetite for power, money, and women. He had affairs with influencers, actresses, and even his own executive assistant. Whispers floated through the corridors of his offices like perfume. Still, his company boomed. No one dared challenge him. He was young, rich, and untouchable. Until he bought the mansion. It was a decrepit estate in upstate New York, said to be cursed, though Jimmy laughed off the rumors. Cursed houses don't scare billionaires, he joked. But that night, in the attic, among forgotten portraits and broken toys, he found the mirror. Tall, oval, cloaked in dust and dread, the mirror seemed to breathe. And when he touched it, he felt off. No sudden bolt. Just a deep, quiet whisper in his mind. You can do it tomorrow. That night, back in his penthouse, the first symptom appeared. He stared at a billion-dollar acquisition deal on his laptop, then yawned, closed the lid, and said, tomorrow. From there, his entire being began to rot, not physically, but mentally, spiritually. The man who once thrived on early mornings and 20-hour workdays now spent days in silk robes, ignoring calls, letting projects wither. Meetings were missed. Deals collapsed. Clients pulled out. Lawsuits stacked up. Lovers left. Trusted partners walked away. The spirit of delay had taken root. He wasn't lazy, he was paralyzed. Every day, he'd say, I'll bounce back tomorrow, but tomorrow never came. And then, the crash. A year later, Delaney Enterprises dissolved under crushing debt. His accounts were seized. Mansions auctioned. He was left in a run-down apartment in Harlem, once again alone, but this time not hungry for success, just broken. Then came the storm. One night, while wandering in the rain, soaked and numb, he ducked into a tiny hole-in-the-wall bookstore for shelter. Inside, he was greeted by warmth, incense, jazz playing softly from a vintage stereo, and a woman. Her name was Sienna Rivera. She was different. No flashy nails, no pretense. Her eyes were steady, kind, and inquisitive. They got to talking. She didn't recognize him at first, which was refreshing. But even after she learned who he was, she didn't treat him like a ghost of his former self. She listened. Really listened. And then, Jimmy said something he hadn't said in years. I have an idea. He told her about a concept he'd once sketched out on a napkin, a digital marketplace where small artisans from inner cities could sell handmade products globally, cutting out the middlemen and empowering communities. Sienna didn't laugh. She leaned in. You could build that. He hesitated. Maybe. But I'd need capital. A team. A base. She gave a small smile. What if I help? It turned out Sienna had inherited the bookstore from her grandfather, but she was also a brilliant coder and low-key entrepreneur. She had money saved, grants she could access, and most importantly a fire that Jimmy had long forgotten. Together, they started again. They built the startup in the back of the bookstore, working late nights under dim lamps, sleeping on couches. They called the company Rooted, a name chosen by Sienna to represent growth from the ground up. This time, Jimmy didn't delay. Each morning, Sienna would whisper, let's do it today, and he would rise, shake off the chains of procrastination, and work. Slowly, Rooted gained traction. A viral video. A grant from a tech foundation. A feature on a morning show. Within 2 years, the startup was profitable. Within 5, it was worth $300 million, and every cent was earned with sweat and intention. Jimmy and Sienna didn't just grow a business. They grew together. He proposed to her on the rooftop of their new office, a repurposed library in Brooklyn. She said yes, laughing through tears. They were married in the very bookstore where they first met, now transformed into a tech hub and cafe, still filled with books and jazz. Jimmy never touched another mirror like that again. He never said tomorrow again. Because he had learned that time, like love and opportunity, waits for no one, and that true success is not built on charm, but on consistency, courage, and the people who choose to believe in you when you can't believe in yourself. Thank you so much for watching Interesting Stories of Moody Tales. Kindly like, subscribe and share to get more interesting stories that's much better than this. Best wishes from here.